And we are live once again. Hello and welcome to the Prince Magnum channel where hot rodding and romance do coexist. I'm your host, Prince Magnum. Welcome once again to Do It Yourself Budget Hot Rodding. Okay, we started to do this live stream yesterday and it just completely crashed as I was just coming to the close. I couldn't believe it because there was a lot of information to take in. First and foremost, right out of the gate, Project Spirit's been down for a little over a month, but a lot of that's just been trying to figure out what we're going to do about the flywheel. When the last starter went out, it took the flywheel with it, and we're talking about the original flywheel, the flywheel that it came with from the factory, and technically 1974. She's listed as 75, but she was built in November of 74. That whole new model year BS that car manufacturers do. That being said, that flywheel had been on there since November of 1974. It's toast, okay? It's flat busted, and we've got to fix it, replace it, something, okay? In the process of this, we discovered that Project Spirit also has the opening for her for the starter on the starter guide plate is weird. I've never seen anything like it, where it's like she has to have a 1 in a million. It's like that 1 in a million starter. The normal Ford starter that goes on a car like Project Spirit for the Inline 250 has a 4.5-inch opening. The one on Project Spirit is a 4-inch opening, and it's almost like a specialized starter. So because of this, it has been extremely difficult to find starters. Used to be able to get them fairly easy from Bonterre Auto, but that place no longer exists. The gentleman who owned that shop and everything had gotten cancer. He's recovered, but now he's got a ton of bills, so he's not going to be reopening that shop anytime soon. It's unfortunate because he did an amazing job at getting those unusual parts for cars like Project Spirit. So that became, that's where that problem is. We ran into where, now we're having to kind of, do we, continue to look for a starter that may not even exist anymore, or do we upgrade it to where it's going to? So what we're going to do is we're going to pull that starter guide plate off in the process of this, grind the opening a little bit bigger so it'll accept the starter like it's supposed to, and the right nose cone and all that good stuff. It's just one of those things that if I'd had anticipated this, when we replaced the original transmission, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So that's one of the things that has to change. We may even just go ahead and make a second starter guide plate, so I don't have to hack and cut on the original, but it may not come to that. It just kind of depends on where we stand when it comes time. So right now, that's the plan. We're going to have to install an all new starter guide. Basically, we're going to have to update that starter guide plate. So that's where that stands. The next issue is when you start talking the flywheel for Project Spirit, it should be noted. I'm just not happy with the way. There we go. A little lopsided, but I guess no, I won't. There we go. That's better. One of the biggest problems with the flywheel on the inline 250s and the 200s, and I think they're all those passenger Ford inline sixes, is they don't make the flywheel anymore. Now you can get the flex plates all day long, which may be why. Well, most people when they deal with like Maverick, the Mercury Comet, or any of those old Fords like that, one of the things that you'll typically run into is most guys, especially my age, will typically yank those inline sixes, manual transmissions out, and they'll go directly to the V8 automatic. That's just kind of a commonplace thing. Nothing against guys that do that, but that's just a commonplace thing. That's a very common theme. And the ones that do decide to keep the inline sixes, they still swap over to the automatic. So time has marched on, and in most cases now, you can't buy the flywheel, not the flex plate. I know sometimes some of us will interchange that, and it's not the same. A flex plate is for the automatics, and the flywheel is for your standard transmissions or manuals for you younger ones. The flywheel, you can only get the outer ring gear. Now, herein lies the problem with that design. The flywheel and that outer ring going on to an inline six, the inline six is an internally balanced engine. So you have to get somebody who can get that as close to perfect as possible, because you start getting a little weight on one side or the other and it throws that whole thing out of whack. So that's the problem. Now, and that also lies in with the problem that you can get one for like the 302 or the 289, and they'll bolt right into place of that old of the old flywheel, except that the ones for the V8s, they're externally balanced, so they've got counterweights on them to kind of, straighten out that weight on those, on the V8. So you can't just slap one on to an inline six unless you take that flywheel to a shop and then you have the weights removed, and you're just talking a little bit more money than what it's really worth. Not to say that we won't do that to kind of stretch that out a little bit in case this one has any issues. We could actually do that. But after talking with numerous shops, and I mean numerous shops, I finally basically started in Bonne Terre and started working my way towards the Ironton area. And basically the game plan to fix this flywheel issue, I'm still going to do the work myself. As a matter of fact, old carburetor Carl, who used to do Mavericks himself, is actually going to jump in on this project. We're going to basically pull Project Spirit over to his garage here in Bonne Terre, which is literally just a few blocks away from HQ. And we'll pull it into his garage. We'll pull the transmission back, and we're going to take the time, go ahead and replace pull that flywheel off, make our modifications to that starter guide plate, and then that flywheel will go to Dale Adams in Arcadia Valley, Missouri. An old friend of mine from high school has assured me that him and his shop can do that. Thank you, Jeff, for letting me know that you thank goodness, old Jeff. He's had the Fox body. I forget what year it is, but it's a Fox body Mustang, the Indy Pace car replica. He's had that since high school, and I don't think he'll get rid of it anytime soon. And because of his knowledge, and one of the guys that works at his shop works on Mavericks, he owns one himself. So Mavericks are his specialty, has assured me that him and his shop can handle Project Spirit's flywheel. As a matter of fact, sitting right behind me here is that ring gear, okay? And this is all it is, okay? And what'll happen is that his shop will have to remove that old ring gear and then pop this into place, okay? And once this goes into place, it'll be just fine for a good long while, okay? He has assured me that this won't be an issue. But that's not where this project, you guys know me better than that, okay? Just doing this is okay, but we are looking at where we're going to have to eventually, because it's starting to get a little more difficult to get those parts for the inline six manual transmission setups, especially for the passenger cars. It's getting a lot harder to, run that system. because of this, I have discussed with Princess Faye at great length of changing over to an automatic. We're already looking at that, and we won't be doing that till much later in next year or real early in say like 2020, where Project Spirit will come off the road for a short period of time, and she'll she'll have her in we'll do that whole swap with her inline 6. But in the meantime, I want everything to last and last well. As a matter of fact, I've even noticed a slight vibration as I'm going down the road, and I know what that's from. U-joints. U-joints are starting to wear out, so now's a dang good time as any to go ahead and replace those original U-joints. So, let me grab them real quick. And for those who do not know, for a lot of your Fords, the U-joints are slightly different. Now, I was actually surprised by this. I really was really shocked that there was different sizes. So, I kind of took that in. I was like, wow, I wouldn't have expected. But here's one of them. I forget if this is the front or the back, but this one's the bigger one. I think this one goes towards the front. But basically what you're looking at is a brand new U-joint for Project Spirit. Now, like I said, I got two because that drive shaft's going to be out. Now's a good time to go ahead and replace them, is any time, just to make it last, okay? Now, when you go to replace U-joints, do me a big favor. Make sure that you get it with a grease fitting, because that'll help it last like twice as long, even longer than that in some cases, depending on, how much you drive it and all that other stuff. The reason why this is so crucial is because from the factory, these are usually a sealed system and doesn't have that zerk there to pump in grease. Well, over time, those will wear out real quick. So you always want to get it the aftermarket with that grease fitting, because you can pump grease in it, keep it going as long as possible. They'll last for years, many years that way. So that's why it's super important to get that. So when you're doing a project like this, take the extra time. Even if you don't think you need, go ahead and take that extra time. Make sure that you're doing it right. And I've already been underneath Project Spirit numerous times, doing all sorts of work and everything, and looking at different things and all that other stuff. I know those are the original ones, and they're starting to wear out. And joke, it takes over 40 years for a certain part to wear out. So common sense tells me, go ahead and replace them while we've got that drive shaft down, okay? Because it doesn't make any sense to just throw it back together in hopes that it'll run when it could wear out. And if a drive shaft, well, if a U-joint goes out, the drive shaft will just drop out in a lot of cases. And especially that front one, that's a dangerous situation, because if that one drops out, the drive shaft can dig into the pavement and flip the car over, okay? That's a scary situation. And I've been in a situation where that almost happened to me in a pickup truck. Drive shaft fell out, and if it hadn't been for that drive shaft bending right in the middle, it would have flipped the truck right over onto its roof. So definitely make sure that you replace these. This is the other one. This is the slightly smaller one. But again, right back to that grease fitting. Also, another little something that you might want to take into consideration when you put these in, make sure that it's easy to get to that grease fitting, because the last thing you want to do is put it in and you can't get to that fitting to pump grease in. So do yourself a favor, make sure you get a U-joint that you can pump grease into, and pump it full and everything and all that good stuff, and that sort of thing. Make sure that you take that time and do that extra work, because the last thing you want is your project to go down when you enjoy driving it regularly. Front wheel drive cars, it's not an issue. They don't have U-joints, okay? So we're gonna drop that right back in where it came from. And there we go. So that takes care of that, okay? So if anybody pops on, has any questions, don't be afraid to ask what we're talking about, okay? But again, these are super, super important for these vehicles. Basically, by doing this, we'll take any slop out of that drive shaft, and if a drive shaft has any wobble to it, you'll feel it as you're going down the road, especially when you start going faster. And over time, what you'll actually get is when you go to engage it into gear, especially with automatics, you'll hear it slap. You'll put it in gear and you'll hear this kind of a metallic slapping sound, and that's because you've got slack in your U-joints, which is not a good thing. All right. While we were also at it, there's going to be, again, we're right back to, things that have got to be replaced. Time marches on, and things need to be replaced. We also got a brand new transmission mount while we were at it. Now, I know some of you are sitting there going, well, Prince Magnum, if you're just going to be changing it out, in a year, in a little over a year at the most, why are you spending the extra time? Just run what you get. Well, see, the thing of it is we're right back to that whole thing. Preventative maintenance, if you will. Take the extra time at this point. We're talking again about a part that's 44 years old, and it might be okay, but it's not going to be okay, if you catch my meaning. So the smart thing to do at this point is to go ahead, it's down, change it anyways. I'm not sure if it interchanges with the automatics, but even if it does, it doesn't, go ahead and take that extra time. And that's not to say that at a later date I couldn't swap back to an automatic if, say, that automatic doesn't work out. And maybe I find that sweet deal on a 4-speed manual. So if you get what I'm saying, this is just extra steps. Now, one of the areas that in yesterday's live stream that we crashed on, we started talking about, doing, changing over, doing, while we were in there, go ahead and doing a clutch kit replacement. But this stuff is getting a little expensive now. You're talking about $100 for to replace the clutch, the pressure plate, throwout bearing, and the clutch alignment tool. Well, I've got a clutch alignment tool, so I don't need it. Need that piece. I've got one just sitting there. It's just it just looks at you whenever I go to open up one of the toolboxes here. So that's not necessary. A pressure plate at this point might be a little extreme, but getting a clutch and a throwout bearing, that's actually pretty important. When we did that, when we replaced the original transmission, we went ahead and put a new clutch in, but we didn't do a throwout bearing or a pressure plate. Well, that pressure plate should be okay to run a little while longer, okay? Everything shows that it's going to be okay for a good minute. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and kind of cut that corner, maybe do a throwout bearing and a new clutch just to make sure, because the clutch that went in there had a slightly smaller diameter than what I really want. I prefer that 10-inch, and it's like a 9.5, which, I mean, it's not a big deal, but, when we get out there and we start doing what we do with Project Spirit, I'd like to have that little extra beef to it just to make sure that nothing gives out on me, because the last thing we want is whenever I'm dumping that clutch to give out and not give us exactly what we're looking for. So we're going to go ahead and do that much at least. There's no sense in messing with that pressure plate right now. We're just going to go ahead and run it. I believe that it's been replaced maybe once before. It doesn't quite, like I said, I've been in there, and it looks like, it's still fairly new. And I would like to do a clutch fork, but again, that clutch fork is holding up okay. This is one of these times where I'm going to go ahead and kind of cut a couple of corners in this particular case. Normally, I don't recommend doing that, but it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and just kind of cut that corner, because we're awfully close to the holidays. We're spending money like crazy and that sort of thing. So I want to go ahead and take that extra, I need that money, if you will, because we also got bills and everything else going on too. So it would just make sense to go ahead and kind of shave that little bit, get what we can get to make those repairs, those preventative maintenance repairs in the meantime, but we'll have to cut a couple corners in that particular area. Now, once all this is done, Project Spirit's good to run again. But we're also getting ready to, we were looking at putting the historical plates on this last time, but we weren't able to do that because reasons. So Project Spirit is also ready to get inspected again. Now, while we're going to do that, we are going to go, you have to kind of do that whole, you have to do this whole thing where you, with Missouri, with historical plates, where you got to pre-order the plates and everything, because they just don't have that stuff on hand. And while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and do the specialty historical plates, because why not? She deserves it, which starts running into a little bit of money. And on top of that, again, Missouri doesn't exactly just have this stuff just kind of laying around. So you've got to give it a little bit of time for these plates to get from where Missouri gets them made to, I guess to, their central licensing office, and then all the way to, so they can make the documentation that they need to, and then all the way to where you live, to that license office, and so on and so on. So you got to give time. And it takes, I think, if I remember correctly, anywhere from 2 weeks to a month to get these in, depending on the demand and all that other stuff. So because of this, this is going to be her, her last inspection, which she was actually due in November. So we're going to take some time with this. We're going to make a few, we're going to spend a little bit of time, make sure that everything's right, because when you get historical plates, that's it. Your car never has to be inspected again. That's the end. And you could pretty well do whatever you want after that. The gloves can kind of come off a little bit, if you will, until you reach like 1996. 96 and newer, you still have to comply with EPA regulations. And a lot of that has to do with the OBD2 reader and all that other stuff. But that starts getting beyond the scope of this particular live stream. Now, all that being said, Project Spirit never really, unless you lived in a major metropolitan area, never really had to adhere to EPA standards. She doesn't even have a catalytic converter. She doesn't even have a smog pump. Unless you get into California, then it starts getting pretty strict when you're in the California area. But that's a different, I don't live in California, so I don't have to worry about all that. Now, all of that being said, it would stand to reason to go ahead and make this last inspection, top notch. Make sure that she's in working order. One of the big issues that we've had is that her exhaust, isn't, it's old and it doesn't quite fit the way that it once did. She's got a bolt missing off her exhaust manifold. So, I mean, it seals up when she gets good and running, but when you first started, you could tell, okay? So now's a good time to go ahead and make sure all that's in order, okay? Because we don't want to be dealing with this stuff down the road. And it would make sense, while a lot of that stuff is still somewhat easy to free up, go ahead and replace that stuff now, because when it comes time to do the engine rebuild, you definitely want everything to free up real easy, okay? Take the time and make sure it's all right. As a matter of fact, sitting right over there, I've even got a brand new exhaust manifold gasket. Now, I know some of you are already saying, well, Prince Magnum, go ahead and swap over to the exhaust header and hold your horses. We will do that, maybe, okay? Depends on, one of the big issues with those older engines is gaskets for the exhaust headers. And I know some of you are saying, well, just double, and use an exhaust manifold gasket and double gasket it. And I know a lot of guys do that, but they're still constantly replacing gaskets for the exhaust headers. And I'll be honest with you, the thought of that just does not sit well with me. So it would make sense going with a system that you know is going to work, but maybe update it to the point where I'm not having to constantly work on it and replace gaskets and all that other stupid stuff. Just skip it and use an exhaust manifold, but maybe work on it where it's not having to be worked on every time you freaking turn around. Because there's that donut gasket that they started. I don't even know why they do that. I went to replace it on that one. It's just a nightmare. Okay. So there's an excellent chance that we may be staying with the exhaust manifold, but we're going to get the exhaust reworked all the way back, and it'll be in a split style, exhaust system where it'll go back so far and then split off into dual pipes. So it'll kind of like be like dual exhaust, but it won't be exactly dual exhaust. We may be, depends on how I'm feeling that day. We may run true cherry bomber glass packs, or we may be staying with turbos of some style. I know Cherry Bomb offers a turbo muffler that makes an amazing sound. I know that MagnaFlow still offers them, and I know Thrush is still out there, and that's one of my favorite mufflers. And when everything's sealed up on that inline 6 with that turbo, she does. Project Spirit does have an amazing sound that I enjoy. When you get up closer, when you get up closer to the front, it still sounds like it almost sounds like a tractor engine. But when you get out back behind that, even that single exhaust, you hear a nice, exhaust tone. It's just one of those downfalls. When you get up there by the front, you could definitely tell it's a 6-cylinder. With the hood up, you can hear that putter like you would on a tractor engine, but out towards the back, no. So that's going to be one of the other things that's got to happen. While we're also in there, we're going to go ahead and replace some stuff for the front end. This is definitely a great time to go ahead and replace like outer tie rod ends. Okay, we did that before, but when we did the front disc brake conversion, we realized that that it's definitely going to have to go to a shop for this. I would feel more comfortable because you definitely want a front end realignment when you start messing with outer tie rod ends and you start messing with those lower A-arm bushings, because they're made right onto the A-arm, the arm itself. Well, those lower ball joints, the arm for the lower. And when you start messing with that, it's got to have a front end alignment. So it would just make sense. Get the parts together, take it in, and have it done all at once, which is exactly what we're going to do on this project. As a matter of fact, sitting right behind me is some of those brand new front end parts. As a matter of fact, we started showing this in yesterday's crashed live stream. This is one of the new outer tie rod ends for Project Spirit. Amazingly enough, for the front disc brake setup, it's identical to the Mustang from 70 to 73. So still in its original wrapper inside the box is this setup. Now, I'm going to grab the other one real quick, and again, we're going to explain a couple of things, okay? That's going to be going on with this project, this whole project, okay? Because the last thing we want to do is just start slapping stuff on without taking time out, okay? This is one that I've had open and, kind of started looking at a couple of things and, just things like that. I should have really went ahead and pushed the issue and got it swapped out, but then, I would have needed a front. It would have turned into an interesting situation. But again, we're right back to, when you get one of these, make sure, again, that you get one that has that fitting so you can pump grease into it, okay? Make sure that you do this, because if you don't do this, these will wear out. And from the factory, even today, they put what they call a sealed system on. Well, with the sealed system, these will wear out anywhere from 5 to 7 years, and you're replacing them anyways. So it would make sense when you go ahead and, especially when you got a car that's got a few years on it, comes time to replace it, get the one that has the grease fitting on it, and maintain it yourself. Pumping grease into these fittings is not that difficult, okay? It really is not. And anybody who tells you otherwise is lying to you, okay? Just jack the thing up, unless it sits up high enough like a pickup truck, or Project Spirit in this case, and do the work yourself. Now, also make sure, if, you know, when you got vehicles with some age, make sure you get that cotter key that goes right in, right like that, and it's folded and locks that nut into place, because the last thing you want to deal with is, you know, this nut backing off and that piece coming loose. It just fits right in. Well, hang on here. About like that. Locks into place, bend, and this thing isn't going anywhere, okay? And it's a simple setup. It's worked for, you know, ever and a day. Anybody who says that it doesn't, you know, hasn't been under these vehicles before, okay? So there you have that. Now, while we're also there, we're going to go ahead and replace the original adjustment sleeves. Now, again, this is just cheap ones, but they'll work just fine. This will go into place with the original ones, and this is part of whenever you go to do your front end alignment, okay? And if the other ones look good enough, we'll go ahead and take them off, clean them up, real nice and pretty like, and we'll set them aside for a later date. Now, again, the ones that are on there are new, but what ended up happening was when we were doing the front disc brake conversion, there was kind of a mishap where the lower control arm, that lower ball joint from connecting into the control arm, and the passenger. This was all on the passenger side, and the boot for that outer tie rod. Well, something happened. A jack slipped and just basically split those boots. And even though the parts are fine, they'll go a little while without having the extra grease and everything. The problem is that most shops, when you go to take them for inspection, even though those parts are fine, because it's got a split boot, they will not pass it for the inspection. So these will have to be replaced. And since we're already there, replace both sides, which is exactly why we have, you know, one for each side. This is just common sense stuff. Okay, if you're going to do one side, you better do both sides. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll have the front end apart. Go ahead, replace these things, get it set up where we're not going to have any issues. Now, later on down the road, middle of next year, we're probably also looking at rebuilding Project Spirit's power steering setup. We may even start looking at doing a Saginaw conversion pump setup. Believe it or not, the Saginaws, for the GMs, there's a conversion kit where you can use it on your Ford. And I'm a little bit more familiar with those pumps, and it's a lot easier to get parts for those than it is for the Fords. So again, we're right back to doing that hodgepodge, you know, Project Spirit being more kind of being Frankenstein's monster. But a lot of this is focused on, again, making sure that she doesn't have any issues once we go right back in, keeping her easy to maintain, easy to work on, easy to get parts for, which is exactly why we're doing what we're doing, okay? So we have a good section of parts ready to go for Project Spirit. All that we need is a brand new clutch and a throwout bearing, and we'll probably be looking at doing something like that along the lines of tomorrow or maybe Friday. Once that happens, we'll wait till just after the holidays. I'll be in touch with Carburetor Carl, and I'll start making those arrangements. Now, I don't know if we're going to live stream any of this. Shoot, I'm still working on the video footage from the Jackson Car Show. As a matter of fact, I had a phone call from 3rd Gen 83, and as he, when he called, I was actually working on some of that footage, talking about, the car show at Jackson. And again, tomorrow we'll be uploading some new videos from earlier this year that I've just had kind of sitting here and wasn't able to upload. See, with the old phone setup that we had, I could actually pull videos directly from my computer to the Samsung that we used to use, and then I could upload them directly right to YouTube. I didn't have to go anywhere special, and I could upload, pretty much all through the month. If I needed a faster upload system, I could go over to my job, because we have free Wi-Fi, or as Princess Faye and I sometimes teasingly call it, Wi-Fi. We called it, it's just a joke between us. Go over there and I could upload and be like that in no time flat. But now it's either I do the live stream or I have to go somewhere special because the phone the iPhone just will not take anything from my computer. You got to have 1,000,001 apps, and it all costs ridiculous amounts of money. And here on the Prince Magnum channel, everything is still out of pocket. Okay, so that's just the way it is. Now, real quick, in the crashed live stream yesterday, a gentleman asked me a question, and I'm going to do my best to answer this question a lot better than I did yesterday. He asked the question, I'm looking for a Maverick. What would you say is a reasonable price? And I'm going to tell you honestly, where I live, and I talked to 3rd Gen 83, and he kind of agrees with me. For a car that you can, for a Maverick, and you can include the Mercury Comet. And I would almost say this is any classic car of the 70s, and in some cases, some of them from the 60s. And I'll even throw in the 80s and some of the 90s vehicles. If it's in condition where you can easily put it back on the road, and you might have to, drop in an in-engine transmission. If you're paying, about $4,000 to $5,000 for that car or truck, and it's in condition where you could just easily put it back on the road without too much hassle, and the rust is minimum. I mean, you're going to have to replace parts, and you might have to actually put in your own engine and transmission. If you're paying between $4,000 and $5,000, I would say that's a fair price. Now, for more obscure ones that are extremely rare, but you could still, there's a great aftermarket supporting it. Say something like for like a 60s, fastback Mustang, or or say like a certain Chevelle Super Sports, or just you all get what I'm getting at. Do yourself, you're going to pay a little bit more for that, and that's okay. Okay, just understand that for your basic run-of-the-mill classic car in two-door, $4,000 to $5,000 is what I would say, and I would say that's across the board. Now, when it starts getting into where you're dealing with bodywork, and a little bit of bodywork is expected on these vehicles, dents, dings, and minor rust holes and surface rust, you're going to expect that. Okay, so I would say that that's fixable. But when you start talking about rust holes like that, big giant rust holes in it, you're going to have to rebuild a lot of stuff. Maybe the interior is ratty as can be. The price should start going down. If they're still asking just walk away. Just walk away, okay? And I'm going to tell you a little secret that's kind of kept quiet among us hot rodders, okay? It's sometimes a little difficult to get parts for, but in most cases, you can buy the 4-door models a lot cheaper than you can the 2-door models. Now, if you're going to look into racing these 4-door models, there's going to be a little bit more weight involved. I mean, the cars get a little bit longer, and you got to figure in all the extra, the weight of the doors and all the mechanisms that run it, and the windows going up and down. So all of that stuff is going to add into a little bit more weight. To give you an idea, a 2-door Maverick, the curb weight is ridiculously low. I think it's around 3,000 pounds. but I know the four doors get substantially more. And in some cases, it's something like 500-600 pounds more. And I know for Project Spirit, for some of the features that she has, she's getting close to, believe it or not, the curb weight that's listed is about 4,000 pounds. So even for a compact, that's pretty freaking heavy. But so just kind of a heads up there. Um, and we're talking like the bench seats and all that other stuff. So that's all played in, yeah. But the four doors, you're going to put on a little bit more weight. Just because the roof lines get a little bit longer, and you could weld those back doors, but four doors are just meant more for practicality. So in most cases, a lot of people are going to turn their nose up at those four doors. But I'll be honest with you, some four doors look better than the two doors. I know myself personally, being more of a GM kind of a guy, I myself actually like. The old 64 to 65 Chevelles in four door more than I do the two door. But that's simply an aesthetic sort of thing. And when you start talking the big full size flagship cars of the 1970s, honestly, a two door version of that, it just does not make sense to me. You're better off in a four. I mean, honestly, just go ahead and get the four door, like the Oldsmobile Delta 88s. Honestly, in my opinion, the two-door version is just disgusting. And the four doors are much more functional. They look better, in my opinion. And that'll even transition into the 80s. I mean, like an 80-something Caprice Classic looks 100 times better in a four-door than it does a two-door. But again, that's my opinion. Some might argue that, okay? But that's just, that's just a practicality thing, too. Again, most people will turn their nose up at the four-door models, and for the record, even though there was no grabber package for the Mavericks for the four-door, that was strictly a trim package for two doors. A lot of that stuff will actually easily bolt into place of the original factory equipment. So I could kind of make Project Spirit look kind of like a grabber if I wanted to. In that four-door model, and it all bolts into place. And in most cases, that's one, you can outfit your four-door to be like a super sport, or in my case, a grab, or or anything like that. Y'all get what I'm saying. So, if you're looking for a cheaper route, don't hesitate to get that four-door model, unless certain parts are hard to come by. I know, like, window glass for the doors on Project Spirit are like next to impossible to get your hands on. But the windshield and the rear glass, that's easy to get because it's the same as the two doors. But the side windows, yeah, that's a bad situation right there, because most, you can call in and try to have the glass cut, but 9 times out of 10, they don't even have the molds for that anymore. They don't even have those shapes anymore. So that's where it does become a problem. So just kind of a heads up on that. And again, that could be an option for you. Okay. So again, don't hesitate to consider that. All right. If you can get the parts for it, don't be afraid. And in some cases, if you're looking at those rare and obscure cars, don't also hesitate to consider maybe a station wagon or some of those tiny hatchbacks of the 1970s and 80s. Well, be kind of wary of the hatchback designs of the 80s, like the Dodge Omni, because they had a lot of problems. That's why you don't see them anymore. The front wheel drive crap, and even like the Chevy Citation. When's the last time you've seen a Chevy Citation? Well, that's because they were horrible rubber band engines and just bad front wheel drive designs. But the rear wheel drive hatchbacks of the 70s, lots of aftermarket available. For the purposes of humor, as a matter of fact, the Ford Pinto and the Mercury Bobcat all shared the same taillights as the Maverick and the Mercury Comet. So a little fun fact right there for you. Okay, so we pretty well covered a lot of stuff. So to kind of, if you will, the executive recap, because there's no sense in carrying on right now, because we've had maybe one or two people pop on. Executive recap. We are going to keep Project Spirit as a stick for a little while longer. Unfortunately, because of the problems at keeping Project Spirit a standard, the problem is that parts just aren't as available as they once were, say maybe 10, 20 years ago. We're having to consider putting in an automatic. But we'll do that, and we'll talk more about that as time progresses. So for right now, let's just, we're going to keep her as a stick for right now, and that's where it stands. And at the same time, we're going to start amassing those parts to start getting ready for that engine build. We're having to actually procure a temporary inline 250 to throw into Project Spirit, just kind of hold her over while we rebuild her original inline 250. And we'll get into more details as as we get closer to time. Along with all of that, wow. Along with all of that, what we're also going to be doing is we're going to make some rebuilds. We're going to rebuild some stuff. Project Spirit's going to spend a little bit more time off the road, but it's not going to be like that 1 6-month period where we were just trying to figure out what shop to take her to, all that other stuff. She's going to spend a little bit of time with Carburetor Carl and our old friends at Dale Adams Automotive in Arcadia, Missouri. Okay. Thank you again to both guys, because I'm going to tell y'all right now, it's getting harder and harder to find people who know what they're doing when it comes to these old cars. And I'm good with a lot of stuff, but there's some stuff I'm just not capable of doing because I just don't have the equipment here. And on top of that, we just don't have the means. I don't have that knowledge. I'm not that good. I'm good, but I'm not that good. There's always that, when it comes to, unless you're talking about an old school professional mechanic, when you get into the shade tree area, there's very few of us that can do everything on these cars. And you'll find that we have certain specialties. Mine happens to be bolt-on parts for engines, and real deep book knowledge. That's where my forte is, and I have expanded a little bit, but there's still some areas that I'm just not good at. I can still time I can still time them by ear, but so that's where it stands, and I'm starting to ramble. Okay, so along with all of that, let's give you a quick update. The Prince Magnum channel is probably going to be working very closely with a slightly larger YouTube channel called Sketch Squad TV. They do a lot of live streams and make some decent money. Well, I talked with the gentleman who runs that channel, Big John, and Big John and I have talked, and he's like, Prince Magnum, I want to get you on there. I want to do some magic, and I would love to do a walk around of this amazing car of yours, Project Spirit. He said, and I'd like to even set up a Kickstarter because I really want to see this car come along a lot further than where you're at right now. So be looking for the Prince Magnum channel to be working a little closer with a different YouTube channel. So really exciting news there. He thinks that a Kickstarter, and I told him, shoot, even $20 to help me with this project would be even greatly appreciated, because unfortunately we're not big enough where people who can throw money into the Patreon account, we've not reached that point. We have the Patreon account, but no one's everybody's just strapped for cash, and they're unable to donate to the Patreon account. If you are able to donate, drop some in there, okay? I don't care if it's $1. I'd just be happy with that, because any help towards Project Spirit's always appreciated. And again, everything here on the Prince Magnum channel is right out of pocket. Also, the Prince Magnum channel because of some past experiences before there was even a Prince Magnum channel, is looking at doing a, I'm looking to contact a much bigger YouTube channel and kind of doing and kind of working with them. I won't go into details, mainly because I don't know if he'd be interested or not, but kind of like a cook-off, because we all know that I love to cook and surviving romance and all that other stuff, but kind of a cook-off of unorthodox, just unorthodox nature, and see if he would be interested at doing a cook-off with me. He's kind of a little bit across country, so what I might be looking at doing is getting in contact with him, and then once Project Spirit's up to snuff, making a trip out there during the summertime and getting to meet this guy and maybe doing some live streams with him, or maybe a podcast of some sort, and sharing my story of sobriety with him on his channel, and of course live streaming for all of you of the Maverick Nation. So there you have that. Okay, we haven't gotten to that point, but I'm going to try to get in contact with this guy. So that's where we stand. All right. It's close to the holidays. We will be doing a holiday special. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to do kind of like a two-sided one, kind of one, kind of where, kind of a season's greetings, sort of a holiday special. And I'm going to actually have to kind of go on a standpoint of kind of putting a larger organization that runs ads on YouTube. I'm going to have to kind of put them in their place because they kind of did something when it comes to this particular time of the holidays. It's just not cool. And basically they're trying to reignite an issue that had died out back in like 2016, and even here on the Prince Magnum channel, we even dealt with that back in 2016, and actually briefly it was a very popular video here on the channel. But we're going to attack that subject again, but that's at least a week away before we're able to even consider doing all of that. Okay, so there's your updates, there's your executive recap, and there's up to speed on Project Spirit. So all right, we've covered and covered and covered. So at this point, before anything else, as always, be sure to check me out on Patreon. If you can donate, great. If not, that's okay. I understand. Be sure to follow me on Facebook. I'm just not messing with the Twitter account, so just check me out on Facebook. Y'all know how to find me. And as usual, all right, get out there and work on a project, okay? Again, idle hands and a creative mind. I don't care what it is, okay? Just freaking do something with yourself, okay? Just do something, all right? If you have a sweetheart, do something special for him today. Guys, pay attention to them. Pay attention to your sweeties, all right? And as always, for all of you out there, especially this time of year, because so many people get depressed so easy, for all of you out there, if no one out there has told you that they love you, Prince Magnum does. God bless you, and have a happy 24. Thank you.